here we are, election over and everything's still standing. It's time for the month ahead for June. Just as we anticipated last month from the stars, the election wasn't terribly exciting, mostly lots of reduced numbers and increased numbers for the EFF, pretty much exactly as the stars said. But the question we really want to ask is it really all over? One of the things you'll remember me talking about during the run-up to the election was that President Ramaphosa's chart looks a little challenging in the months and weeks immediately following the election, and we're starting to enter those now. At the time I was referring to June and July, which are these months directly ahead of us. And as I've said before, there does seem to be a lot more pressure going on behind the scenes than is apparent in front of the scenes. There are signs of still some, let's call it disunity, or some anger or frustration, or kind of even warlike moves going on in the party. We all know that the various possible splits and factions and all of those things in the ANC were certainly not quelled by the election, and they're going to be stirred again by the final announcement of cabinet. We know that the party has been presenting a very unified exterior, as was expected immediately after the election. What is particularly interesting, though, is when you look at Ace Magashule, who, not unexpectedly, is saying lots of things to try and deflect attention away from himself, and it remains to be seen whether the president will ever have any power to do something about Magashule. But one thing that Magashule says in his efforts at distraction is about how the government must get immediately cracking on those job and other immediate promises that they made, rather than the big policy issues at first. And why he's right about that from an astrological point of view is that the month ahead is looking a little bit challenging when it comes to labor, perhaps labor issues, dealing with labor and fulfilling some of those promises. It's not even a question of whether the government can or should fulfill those promises so fast. It's really just about labor and the people responding in some way. It seems to me that many people comment that the ANC government continues to get elected despite their failure to fulfill many of their promises, and it seems to me now that the way that they're dealing with that, realizing now of course that they're not going to be forgiven for very much longer for that, is to try and fulfill those promises as soon as possible, because they're going to have unrest on their hands. Look out for unrest in the 2 months ahead, possibly as early as this month ahead, June, but certainly by the time we're looking at July, there does seem to be strikes, disputes, those kind of things are very much back in action. So the government has basically a month to get something together and try and make some of those promises happen, or other happen, so that they can actually avoid some of the problems they are going to be having in those areas. It does look like the health sector might be one of the major players in there, and issues and promises related to health matters need to come up as well. But as we know, there are direct problems for the president himself. He continues to fight a battle. Looking closer, it seems that he's still equipped to fight this battle, and maybe it's not as scary as it can look astrologically, that very strong forces are ganging up against him, but it might not be so scary looking at the chart now and seeing how he is managing to balance those forces. But it still looks very touch and go for the next 2 months as to how much he can express and express his will and actually get done what he's trying to get done. So I'm not going to make any pronouncements about his cabinet. I have no idea, and I'm going to leave that to him. But it does look like there is some kind of a general clean-out going on in the country that makes me expect that the same then will be true for his government and his cabinet. Starting in the last few months, since perhaps earlier this year, there's a long period of the cleanup and the skeletons coming out of the closet. And as I've said so many times, we ain't seen nothing yet. June is one of those months we're going to see some more. Some surprises, secrets, some dirty doings back to the surface in June. You know, I'm even beginning to sound like we've heard it all before. It doesn't even sound like a prediction anymore, although it is. So, as much as I do expect that it is going to happen, it's not surprising, whether we're looking at astrologically or otherwise, there seems to be a lot of that, and that's going to continue for a 2-year period. So there may be a bigger way that we can understand that, is that President Ramaphosa has got this 2 years that have started recently to get that house in order, and the challenge is for everyone to hold together in his government in those 2 years for all of that to happen, because there's secrets coming out and there are players behind the scenes who are going to be playing their hands. And as I've said, a lot going on behind the scenes in these 6 weeks, so stay tuned, expect surprises, and expect dirty linen as usual, and expect some distraction from the official opposition, the DA, who, although I know that they keep on saying they're not really going to shake things up, I remain a little unconvinced looking at it astrologically speaking. As we did expect astrologically, their figures were dramatically reduced in many areas, in many ways. They certainly did not perform how they expected to. But I think the surprises are not quite over. So it could be a change of leadership. If it's going to be a change of leadership, that might take longer than June, but that's still going to be in the immediate couple of months. I wouldn't be surprised if it was June, but there are other changes in June that could run up to something like that. When I say a change of leadership, as I say, I know that they say that they don't plan to do that, so the odds are that they won't, because they are in charge of that, they do have the power to be. But at the same time, surprises mean anything can happen, so we'll just keep an open mind about that. Rather, let's look at it as there are lots of big shake-ups of some kind, not necessarily from internal, coming up in the DA that still need that party to settle before we know where they stand after this election period. It's still not clear. And as for the EFF, well, are you surprised? They're looking very happy, astrologically speaking, whether or not they did quite as expected. It definitely looks like things continue to go relatively easily in their department of their chart at the moment. Relatively easy. Entering into official opposition in 3 provinces is going to be challenging for them, and is going to cause some changes within their party as well. Probably not to the extent that it worries anyone outside of that party. It's a little while before we're going to see any worrying action from the red corner of the room. So looking ahead at Aries for the month ahead, it does look like this is going to be a month where work should not be the thing that you're prioritizing. Probably only because it just is not the right time to be chasing all sorts of goals and ambitions while the sun is shining. It's time for a holiday. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a holiday in the middle of the year, but that means you also need to be happy to spend some of your energies elsewhere than your working environment. Hopefully in some kind of more fun type of setting, or at the very least in something that has a sense of personal reward more than some major reward or goal of your life being fulfilled. Even if it comes down to something like menial tasks or stuff that's just lots of hard work that needs to get done, it's cool, chill with it. It's going to work well to concentrate on that stuff rather than the big stuff. That also means it's not a great month for money. You're going to be spending more money than you're probably going to be bringing in, or maybe not quite like that, but certainly going to be spending more money than you're going to want to be spending. So that's why the trick is to make sure that you're spending it on something fun, hence holidays, fun things. Get 2 things together. Best time for a holiday, best time to spend money on things you don't really want to spend it on. You could actually end up having a good time. For Taurians, things are beginning to settle down, and hopefully you're ready to start going ahead with some things that you've been unsure of. But it remains true that not all the information you need is available to you. So depending on you, depending on the circumstances for you personally, you might have to go ahead in that situation. But for some Taurians, it means you still need to wait, and that might not be a fun thing to do. But it's not something you're going to have any difficulty doing. You will, of course, already know that there has been a lot of frustration, especially in the last week or so, of kind of finally getting things together or making something happen or getting out there in some way. So don't be surprised if that goes on a little while longer as just things gradually become clearer. But they will become clearer, and certainly over the next month you can also expect some help from other people and perhaps important people in your life that could help some of those things come together. So don't leave it all into yourself. Maybe it's not just about you getting all the information you need before you can proceed. Maybe it's okay to sometimes rely on the help of other people. You can go and seek it, but certainly you should accept it if it is coming your way. And that's especially true since it's looking like it's going to be coming from your friends. Improve your friendships and your outcomes by accepting the help that's coming your way. Gemini, it is your month, and have a great birthday month you will, because it does look like it is a month where you can get a lot of your own stuff done and the stuff you really want to do, which may or may not have anything to do with your professional life. But what is important is that it's not going to happen quite as fast as you'd like, especially if you're born in the early part of Gemini, the week that's just begun, and still another week of that more. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get things going. There seem to be frustrating problems going on. You might be dealing with people who don't seem to understand what you're on about, and quite frankly, always a good idea to check in with yourself and make sure that perhaps maybe the communication problem is coming from you, not necessarily them not understanding you. It's cool. You think fast, you've got lots of ideas in your head, and that's often why people don't get where you're coming from. So a good way to make this month work more smoothly for Geminis is to focus on making sure I clearly express what I need, want, or whatever the case may be, dealing with the fact that it's still going to take a while for people to get their act together, or even for things to come together in my own life. But by the second half of the month, they're going great, and that's where you can really expect own goals, things where you need to stand up for yourself, things that are important to you personally, finally begin to shine late in the month of June. Well, Cancer, it does look like it could be a little bit of a tough one for you this month. Things are just not going the way that you'd like them to go. That could be truest in your financial circumstances, and that might be actually quite a good thing, because there you can keep your eye on numbers or actual circumstances and get things under control, dealing with tangible, real problems that you can see and find solutions to. The fact is not that money itself is going to end up being a problem, just that things need to be sorted out in some way. Although it could be quite a challenging month for money, and that's especially if you're relying on other people, if either you're expecting to have payments come in, or you might actually need resources or money from other people. That's going to be very difficult at this time. You might find it's best to lay low, something Cancerians do like to do, and gather your forces in, but the challenge in all of that is not to run away and hide, and not to push away the ones that you love and who love you. This is still an important time to do the things that Cancerians love best, and that is kind of snuggle up with family, because as your own birthday month approaches, you'll find that your sense of neediness grows a little bit. So during the month of June, keep those anchors strong and those people in place while you learn to rely more on yourself than anyone else. Leo, what a great month you look to be having in the month of June. I mean, I hardly want to second guess how much greater it's going to be than I can even imagine for you, but all I can suggest is you run out there and you grab it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all running and exciting like that as well. In fact, the way that your chart does look this month looks a little bit more chill than running out there and doing all sorts of fantastic things. But if chill it is, then chill is what you've got to do. That's going to work really well to still allow you to feel a smooth month where it seems like everything goes according to plan, and importantly, where other people also respond to your output, whether it's in your friendship circle or your professional circle, especially in your professional circle, as well as where you might receive any help or resources or feedback from other people. For many Leos, though, that'll also mean the trivial things in our lives. Dealing with the people all around us in the most everyday sense of our lives can mean dealing with your neighbors and your family and all of those people you see in your life all the time. So, as I've said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's very exciting, but it's still going to work out feeling well. To make it exciting, if you've got any personal plans, especially creative ambition or something about you, it's time. Get that going. Virgos, you're not afraid of busy. In fact, you actually quite get off on it sometimes. But I think what is important is that sometimes there's the kind of busy that you'd rather not be doing, and this is the busy that comes from other people. It's kind of like this is the kind of month where you find yourself picking up after other people, is how that usually happens. And it's not necessarily the best way for you to be spending your time at this time. Because for Virgos, like your next door neighbors, the Leos, it looks like personal plans, personal projects, creative projects, and those kind of things can really step forward at this time. I only wish you've got the opportunity to do that. It is going to be tough. Especially for the first part of June, things are going to be moving excruciatingly slow. And you might even find some opposition from places you didn't expect it. But as the month goes on, things will move a lot more smoothly for you, and then you'll find yourself able to act in a much more effective fashion. Get going in the second half of the month. Make sure you get personal plans into action and things work for you. You also need to be careful. It's not your own words that get you into trouble. And you might have to guard what you say. Make sure that you are diplomatic this month, especially because you're trying to be helpful, as Virgos are so wont to do. Guard your words, choose them carefully, rather use them for your own purposes. Libra, you've been awfully quiet of late, and it might be a good idea to keep it that way, because it seems to me as if you've got something up your sleeve. So whether that's in your personal life, which is where it most likely is, and that's your personal goals and your creative goals, or perhaps more something that belongs to the world like your profession, it doesn't really matter. But I do think it's still necessary to keep things a little bit under wraps for a while. Not really the time to start talking about things. In fact, there are creative, fertile juices boiling under the surface. This is a good time to do anything that needs extra problem solving or that does require a creative approach. But as I keep saying, I suspect there's something deeper going on. There's something brewing. And if you do have some great idealistic plan about something creative, this is the indication that it's just going to be a couple of more months, maybe only 2 more months, before you can really get something into action. Time to stop umming and ahhing and weighing things up and get going. Will certainly rock around by July. So June, this is the fertile field that you need to start reaping. But you don't have to leave that to creative projects. All areas in your life right now benefit from a much more creative approach. That's how problems are removed. Scorpio, I know that you've heard it all before when people say you're intense, you're acting intense, and they find you intense, and here's me saying exactly the same thing once again. It's one of those intense times, by which I really mean you're not spitting it out when you ought to be spitting it out. What people, loved ones around you, are experiencing as intense is really your withdrawnness, not so much intensity. Some Scorpios might be feeling a little bit under the weather, depressed, down and held back, and that's probably the reason why you're not spitting it out. But you don't want the collateral damage of feeling bad turning something into worse than it really needs to be. It might really be a good time to do a health check and a lifestyle check and do things which make you feel, on the one hand, much more in charge of your own life and your own self and your own body, and on the other hand, get some of those health checks done, because every now and then we've got to do them. It's what I call investing in your body. This is a great time for you to invest. So lifestyle changes, diet changes, those kind of things. Gym you've been meaning to go to. June is the month to finally get it happening. I know we usually see the joggers running around in January, but the Scorpios have got their own agenda. There are also other areas of your life that will benefit when you focus on your body that are all about yourself. Put it there. Sagittarius, things look like they're continuing to work really well for you in your personal life. And this is something that you could extend a little further. It's great that personal life and personal relationships are benefiting. Doesn't mean you should take your hand off the wheel. Obviously make sure that you're returning the gains that you receive in that relationship area. But what I'm also seeing is that you can take that success at relationships this month into other areas of your life. Of course, that's especially professional areas, and that's especially true if your profession involves establishing and maintaining relationships with other people. That's really where the focus of the gains is during this coming month. Even if it isn't, though, that's a good strategy to pursue to make some of your goals happen. It doesn't only have to be professional goals. Any goals could benefit at this time by checking out who do I know and what could I say and how do I approach them, and use your Sagittarian charms. The whole point is that the benefit in personal life will be felt in other areas. People will experience you as personable and will respond to you in a personal way. Hey, this could even be one of those times where you need to actually personalize one of your plans or goals or ways that you want something to be done, and that's what's going to make people want to support you in doing it. Make it yours. Capricorn, I've spoken to other signs today about having a holiday in the middle of the year, and all I can say for Capricorns is that if only you could be so lucky as that. Not that you would want to, maybe in theory, but Capricorns are not fond of taking holidays at the best of times, least of all in the middle of the year. But you're going to want to after a while, because it's just got that feeling of one thing after another. The challenge for Capricorns this month is about letting go of power, letting go of what you think you're in control of, because you obviously aren't. And discovering that you have to learn to what you have to be without. What will make it easier for Capricorns is that financial matters can continue to do well and improve over the course of this month, even when everything else is asking you to learn to let go. So let go in other areas, work on those financial matters. They're going to keep you feeling like yourself. Put your head down, it's eventually going to end. Aquarius, it's time to explore something new while letting go of something old. Unfortunately, we often don't get to choose what we have to let go of, and perhaps that's going to be your situation this month. It looks like where you've been depending on someone else or relying on someone else, you're probably going to be let down, or you might find really just experiences of being let down in a more general sense. Don't despair, be philosophical about it. That really is going to work for you. There's still plenty coming your way, and that means there are other sources of resources. So you may need to have a look at who have you been relying on, and perhaps you've been relying out of loyalty or out of habit or out of something to do with the past, rather than relying out of a good reason to expect someone to fulfill the promise of what they've made or what you've asked them to do for you. Still, whether or not you're getting that level of cooperation, your goals are making progress. You should see some financial benefit, financial results from things you've been working on for a while, but it's going to take a lot longer for the real rewards to show. That's the challenge with this at this time, Aquarius, is the bigger goals are going to take longer, but you will see some immediate goals on the go. It might be a challenging month emotionally at times for you. Might be feeling a little bit down or low. Hang in there, it's not going to last. Well, Pisces gets to start and end the month on a high note, and is the sign that's probably going to be having it easiest as this month goes along. The challenge always with Pisces, and sometimes I even fear telling you how good it's going to be, because the challenge is that Pisces easily slack off, and kind of doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you can just get into the go with the flow mode and everything is just fine, and the next thing you know, a whole month has gone by and you haven't taken advantage of whatever might have been possible during this month. So that's the real push, that's the real issue, Pisces, this month, is that things are going to go so well that you're going to have opportunities to do things that require either a little bit of courage, or that are going to require the help of one other person, possibly someone close to you, and you're going to have to make that happen, approach that person and make that happen. But you're going to be feeling so in the groove and going with the flow that you might find yourself not getting on with all the things that you should be doing just like that. You know, you can't not be a Pisces. You're never going to charge forth into action as if you're an Aries. But if you spin it the right way, the person who is helping you, the person who you can rely on, could also help make sure, or you can delegate things accordingly, that your plans easily go ahead, even despite yourself, despite feeling a little too ready to go with the flow. Make sure someone else does the pushing, and then you can go with the flow that you created yourself. Well, looks like things are moving just as slowly in our own lives as in the rest of the country. I'll be back next week at the usual time. See you then.